Good evening, campers. I hope you're going well. Andy here, your professional human, with another in the Professional Human series, sponsored by Anywhere Auctions, amazing online auction platform. Thank you so much to Anywhere Auctions for giving us their support. And team, I'll remind you, just keep your eye out. There is a very, very cool auction that's going to be done online through Anywhere Auctions. It's going to be for charity. I believe it's going to be for the Royal Children's Melbourne Royal Children's Hospital. Put your teeth in, Reed. And the item that we're going to be auctioning, right? That I've been honoured to be asked to be auctioning. It's a genuine, one-of-a-kind piece of real estate-related art that is so cool, so incredibly cool, and you've got to be in it to win it. So keep your eyes and ears peeled for the charity auction of the year for the Royal Melbourne Children's Hospital. Why can't I say that? Why can't I say? Anyway, team, I hope you're going well. How's your week started? How's your week been out of 10? How's everything going for you and yours? It's getting all of a sudden quite tasty in Victoria and New South Wales. Lots and lots of action kicking around every single state, territory, and across the ditch over in New Zealand as well. Loads of activity. Not really much of a hint of things slowing down, except for some of those vendors, some of those sellers that are just getting a little bit too carried away with things that are going on right now. I mean, there's still some ripper results, don't get me wrong. But strategically, it's those ones that have been absolutely tuned to a T from a strategy point of view. Those that just go windmilling in, struggling to get themselves over the line. Cameron, welcome to you, sir. Cracking on a 9 for the week. Amazing. Good stuff. Good to hear, sir. Now, gang, on Monday, the last episode of this, I talked about how transparency is the power in today's game, especially when we consider the fact that knowledge is so much more abundant for our customers, for our consumers, for our clients, because, you know, tippy tap of the Google, and they know, they won't potentially know as much as what you know, but they know enough to smell bullshit from a mile away. Now, I had a couple of really cool conversations following on from that around a concern, particularly amongst young agents, amongst newer agents, but particularly those that are, you know, younger and within the game as well, right? And they sort of stressed a real concern to me in the respect of not understanding, for want of a better word, not understanding where their true value lies. What is it then? If you're saying to me, Andy, that vendors know as much as what we do in terms of dollars and cents, numbers, facts, figures, all the rest of it, then what value do we bring? Like, why? Like, why are we even, you know, bothering if they know what we know, right? And this is the real key question that I'm really glad is being asked of us, because ultimately, team, right? They might know stuff, but there's a difference between knowing and doing, right? And what do you think those differences are? Because it's much like what I mentioned, I think, last week when I talked about what we can learn from MasterChef, where some of the best chefs in the world, what they do is they give away all of their recipes and how to do things and how to make the meals that they make. But ultimately, it's not them that's making them, right? So what value is tangible within this transaction that we can openly be confident with and draw strength from? Right? It's an interesting, and realistically, not many have articulated it. Not many have really defined it in any way, shape, or form as such. Okay, so what is the value that we bring? Having knowledge is one thing, but being able to put it all together in a successful campaign ain't easy. No, it's not, mate. But why? Because theoretically, the result's binary. Evening, Bo. The result is binary. It sells or it doesn't. Yeah, there's only two things that can happen to a property: it either sells or it doesn't. It either rents out or it doesn't. Yeah, when it comes to executing on a transaction. So, what is it? What is it then that we've got to give? Well, it kind of got summed up really, really well on a video that I watched a few years ago from on YouTube from a guy that I would highly, highly, highly encourage you to start following yourself. Okay, is a guy called Phil Nosworthy, Phill Nosworthy, Northy. And a few years ago, he had this thing called the Be Smart Club, right? And he put a series of videos out on YouTube, little short ones, like 2 to 4 minutes long, right? Not that long. And an extremely intelligent guy. Like, seriously, his wiring I admire more than most. I've had the fortune of meeting a fair few people now. His wiring, the way that he is manufactured, both up here and in here, is off the charts incredible. So inspiring, so world leading, in my opinion. And the way that he articulates it is just insane. Now, in this one particular video, right, he talks about how when he first started, his first ever job was at a retail store. He worked for Giorgio Armani retail store, but it was just retail. And he used to say, he goes on to say that there was one guy that used to come in at the start of every season and spend like $250,000 buying the entire line of Armani for that particular season. And he was this real hot shot broker of some description, banker or a hedge fund manager or something like that, right? Really super, super powerful, super up there, super intelligent guy, incredibly talented as well. Now, on one particular season, the trousers went from a slim fit to a wider fit. And all of a sudden, Phil, as a 20-year-old back then, understood something so incredibly powerful that these new agents, these younger agents in particular, the ones that have reached out to us and said, well, what value have I got to bring? This is the big lesson in this little story. This guy that Phil was serving, massive hot shot, like Teflon, did nothing stuck. But in that moment where he put on those trousers and they didn't fit quite the same as what he was accustomed to, he shriveled up into this little ball of anxiety, worried that he looked like a clown in these really baggy trousers. He pokes his head out the curtain and says to Phil, like, what's going on? I'm really not sure about what to do here or whether this is right or whatever. Completely taken off beaten track. And it was in that moment that despite Phil being a 20-year-old, still wet around the ears, still, a long way away from where he is today, he knew the one thing that this hotshot banker didn't know. And this is the crucial lesson in this game. As long as you have something either up here or up here that the consumer, the client, the customer across the table doesn't have, then you have an intrinsic value to what to bring to whatever it is that they want to achieve that you got the call for. Let me say that again. If you have just the one thing that is missing from their mental or emotional arsenal when it comes to progressing their lives, you've got an intrinsic value to bring to that consumer in that transaction. Now, how does that translate from a real estate point of view, right? Well, the big thing that we've got to bear in mind, gang, is, like I said, knowing is one thing, doing is something completely different. And the reason why knowing and doing is different, you could say in part one is experience, right? Of course. But for those younger agents who panic because they don't necessarily have said experience, one of the things that you're bringing to the table is an ability, right, to have half a degree or a degree of separation from the outcome. Okay. Now, this is where commission breath starts to come into the conversation, right? Because the second that you go into any listing presentation, landlord presentation, whatever the case may be, you for 1 second, you go into it worried about your paycheck, then the value that you bring to that transaction diminishes dramatically because you're allowing your emotions, i.e., I need to get paid, whether it's desperation, ego, whatever the case may be, those negative emotions, you will naturally allow them to take over the controlling decisions that will actually help the consumer move forward in the right way. So the second that you go into it with commission breath, you're stuck. You're just one of the many. And then, therefore, it will be a race to the bottom of commission because you are bringing no real tangible value. Okay. Now, for those of you who actually want to make it, do something positive and give a shit and whatnot, which they are the majority. I still firmly believe the majority just want to do right by their customers. Yeah. You guys have got that intrinsic value with everything when it comes to every single consumer that you talk to. Head of. Why? Because of the fact that your ability to be able to take a step back from the situation and look at things both logically, IQ, and emotionally, EQ, gives you an advantage, shall we say, a value that our customers simply cannot have. If they own that property, right, then the decisions for them are way more greater. They're way more magnified than any sort of decision that you can make that you'd need to make as a professional. Like a doctor, right? Practice makes perfect, point one. But mainly, like a doctor, they work so emotionless, right? And that is realistically why I would trust them over anybody else to cut me up. I don't want them getting emotional while my body's open and they're doing bits and bobs to me organs and whatnot. That is why they charge exorbitant amounts of money. The intricacy of what they do is significant, granted, but the fact that they can operate on a table, on a human being without any emotion is a value that we could never have, right? If you wanted to be a doctor, ultimately, you can read the books, you can do the practice, you can become a doctor if you really wanted to. But from a real estate point of view, you can read the books, you can do all the bits and bobs, you can do all the numbers, facts and figures, so on and so forth. But if it's your house, then there's going to be an element to this decision that we, the consumer, can't control or would struggle to control. I've just gone through it myself, right? Selling this place and knowing all that I know, I still needed someone else to come and help me sell my house. Now, do I know enough to be able to sell my own joint? Fuck, you'd hope so, right? Of course I do. My wife's a property manager. You don't think she knows enough? Of course she does. But when it came to our home, our property, I couldn't have thought of anything worse than having myself sell the home. I always said the one property that I would never auction, I would never pick the hammer up for is my own home. Never. Because there is just way too much going on for me to be able to make clear decisions. And that clarity, that level of clarity in thinking, in feeling, is that's the intangible value that we have to offer to our client base. But so many of us within the industry really struggle to see that and notice that because we get caught up in the numbers and stuff, in the what, in the shit. And then we worry because we don't have that value. We don't feel we have that value to give to our clients. I'm telling you now, gang, a lot of you are focusing on the shit that you don't need to focus on. The numbers are the numbers. The legislation is the legislation. Now, do you need to prove to your clients that you know what you're doing, the IQ? Of course you do. They're not just going to hand the keys to some dill. So, yes, you're going to need to be able to flex those intellectual muscles. However, part of our game, part of why we bring the value that we bring, the bigger part, which we don't acknowledge anywhere near enough, is the ability to be subjective in our decision making. It's the ability to see things with a greater degree of clarity than our consumers over the other side of the table. To put it quite simply, right? To put it quite simply, there's one word that sums it up, our value. Perspective. We are paid to have a perspective over the whole transaction. We are paid to bring a level of perspective that our clients, our customers feel that they can fall back upon as and when shit gets real. The theory is there for everybody to learn. Numbers don't lie, right? Anybody can find numbers. But the problem is, team, if you're a listing agent in particular, and if you're a young listing agent, right? Heed this. If all you do is talk about what you do and what the outcome is going to be, potentially, and what their property is worth, then you are not, one, you're not doing yourself any favors whatsoever or doing yourself any justice in your position. But two, you're not believing in the value that you are actually there to bring. If all this game was about was what needed to happen, then we would be out of job. There's that much red tape now. There's that much legislation, that much paperwork, right? That, like I said, the result, the actual outcome is so binary now. You can do a paint by numbers if you really wanted to, as a consumer. You could, and the transaction will happen. But the reason why a lot of these for sale by owners and whatnot don't go so well is because of all of the other little details, right? That we know pull on those emotional heartstrings, both for seller and buyer. And it's up to us to be able to interpret that to them with a perspective that they would never be able to have. So for you young agents, right? You young agents out there that really struggle to justify your own existence when you're going into a listing presentation, or you shit yourself because you're 21 and they're 55 and and they've got all this world experience and all that sort of stuff. Ultimately, team, you'll always have something that they don't have. And that's perspective. That should give you a degree of confidence, right? That should be able to give you that level of strength that allows you to feel comfortable in your own skin when you're going into a presentation. Just that alone. Now, don't get me wrong. If you've not put the effort into actually learn the IQ, then you're fucked, right? You're proper fucked. But remember, in every single transaction, whether it's sales or rentals, your customer is judging you on two things. The basic mechanics. Do they know what they are doing? And it's a very basic process at the end of the day, in terms of the black and white of the process. Selling, renting. Very, very basic in terms of a process. But two, have you got the emotional intelligence and the emotional awareness, the emotional know-how to give us, the consumers, perspective when we lose track of what's important? I always talk about making sure that we maintain perspective, or we help our clients maintain perspective because of the end goal that they are using real estate as a vehicle for, right? One of the main reasons why I'm here, Mr. and Mrs. Vendor, is because I want to help you not just sell this place, but allow you to achieve the goal that's resulted in you calling me here today. And when things do get serious and it really gets testy and you get tested with them, you're not sure what to do, you get nervous, you get anxious, all those things that cloud judgment, that is one of the main reasons as to why you need me to be here. Because right or wrong, I will be able to see and maintain a degree of perspective on that end goal when you can't. And you're going to need that at some point during this transaction. Because how much more regret will you feel if you make a decision with your heads based on a clouded judgment in any one particular scenario on an offer that can allow you to achieve your goals, but at the time, the red mist descent, you just don't think it's the right thing to do, and you're anxious and you're wound up and all the rest of it. You're going to need a voice of reason at some stage. That's what I'm going to be here for. Now, hopefully, we can build a level of trust here that allows you to be able to, understand and trust the fact that I am going to be focusing on that perspective, that end goal. Because sometimes, and this is where that transparency comes into play, team, as I'm sure you can appreciate, Mr. and Mrs. Vendor, you may feel, having heard lots of stories about agents and whatnot, that, yeah, there'll be some that will tell you to sell because that's the best offer. And that's just because they want that commission check. For me, the commission check is secondary. Of course, it helps pay the bills. Of course it does. But it's secondary to my reputation. I want to make sure that we get the right money for the asset, bearing in mind what that end goal is. Now, you could wait forever, and of course you're going to make more money eventually because the market's all going to go up. So you could do that. But if time has any factor on what it is you want to achieve, in any way, shape, or form, so basically, if you want to achieve that goal before you die at some point, probably not a bad idea that you have that perspective. That's the key word, team. And that is the thing that you guys need to focus on a lot more than we put your house on realestate.com. And we've got a premier ad. And yes, we do professional photography that's dead good. And we write an ad for you. And we get it across all the major portals, main ones being realestate.com and domain.com and Homely sometimes. Come on, gang. You are worth more than that. So stop playing in the kiddie end of the pool and get involved in the stuff that you actually bring value with. And if you're struggling with that, you got to fucking work on that. If you panic, if you're in a listing presentation, and all of a sudden, because you're a young age and you've not had many listings before, it could be your first listing, maybe. Ooh, that's exciting. But if you're feeling that adrenaline take over and all you're focusing on is getting that signature on that dotted line, then you are foregoing the value that you are there to provide. So have a think about that, right? Nerves is a good thing. Butterflies means that you give a shit. When all you start focusing on is that signature on that bit of paper, you're losing sight of why you were there and why you're there to bring value. All right, gang? Relatively short and sweet tonight. It took only 23 minutes. Team, have yourselves an amazing second half of the week. Lots of action on the weekend all around the country. So stay focused, all right? Stay focused on the job at hand and do everything you can for your clients. I know that I've had a number of sales before auction day, right? Which says to me that there is a degree of nerves in the air amongst some agents around whether they're going to be able to get an outcome at auction or not. That's saying to me that there's a bit of nervousness around that gap between where buyers are and where sellers are. It's the first sign in action. So just be aware of that, team. I know Elise. I know how to cook a beef Wellington. I'm sure as hell not going to try and do it, though. 100%. Me too. I mean, look, you could say the same about my cakes, but to be honest, I don't really give a shit how good or bad they turn out. So, team, hopefully that's provided you with just maybe a small degree of confidence, a glimmer of light to those that ask me these questions around worrying about what value they actually have to bring. Well, I tell you, gang, if that's the worry that you've got, it means you're focused on the wrong thing completely. But that's the cool thing about this team, is that if that is the case, then it's a relatively simple switch to go from focusing on what to focusing on how and why. Perspective. All right, gang. Stay safe, healthy, and happy. Love ya. Take care. Speak to you soon.